It's Thirsty Thursday. You're so thirsty, thirsty Thursday. Thirsty for knowledge, thirsty Thursday. Drink it up. Today I have 5 tips for the on-site management team to help you prevent and prepare for an unfortunate fire event. The first thing that every on-site team should do is complete a fire risk assessment. You'll want to comb the property, complete inspections, and make sure you walk through various scenarios that might occur on site that could possibly result in a fire. Even if you've completed these assessments in the past, this is something that you'll want to do on a regular basis, either annually or anytime you have a change on site, like new construction or a change in an amenity, or maybe your demographics have changed. You'll want to make sure that you are up to date on these risk assessments and you're preparing not only your team members, your property, but even your residents for an unfortunate fire event. So what types of things should you look for when completing this assessment? Oh gosh, there's a whole list of things, but a few things that you should do is inspect your heating systems, especially with the change of weather and more people using those systems. You'll want to make sure that you're completing a thorough inspection and watching out for some of those warning signs that could lead to a fire. You'll also want to inspect your electrical systems, both the main systems on your buildings and inside of the apartments. You'll want to be sure that you're properly storing chemicals so that you're not putting your residents or employees at risk. And if you're in an area that suffers from drought, you'll want to make sure that your landscaping, shrubs, plants, everything is fully hydrated so that with one flick of a cigarette, they don't go up in flames. If you have shrubs that seem to be extremely dry, make sure that they're cut far enough back from the buildings as not to ignite the buildings if they do happen to catch fire. And you'll want to assess the risk that you have within the apartment homes. Things like how many of your residents are smokers, and do you allow the use of candles in the apartments? Are we conducting regular inspections to ensure that we're not overloading our electrical systems, we're cleaning our stoves, and we're making sure that all safety devices are working properly? And that brings me to tip number 2, completing regular inspections on your property. Whether you complete these monthly, quarterly, or annually, it's important that you're reaching out to your residents on a regular basis to ensure that they understand the guidelines within their home and what they can do to help prevent a fire. So what are you looking for when you complete these inspections? Well, as it relates to fire safety, you want to make sure that they aren't overloading electrical outlets. You'll want to check their stoves and ovens to ensure that they're clean and there's not a lot of excess grease. You want to make sure that they aren't using extension cords under rugs or carpeting that could possibly create a fire hazard. Test those smoke detectors. Make sure that those batteries are being changed at every time change or quarterly, and ensure that if you provide a fire extinguisher, it's in place and it hasn't expired and it is fully charged. If you want more about what to look for in those resident inspections, view the video I shared with you last week about how your residents can help prevent fires. It will show you exactly what to look for and what might be a problem inside their home. And don't forget to check their balconies, storage closets, and even garages, because you never know. They may have chemicals improperly stored, they may have barbecue grills that aren't allowed, and you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to help prevent a fire and educate your residents on things that might be harmful to not only themselves, but to the other people that live around them. The third thing that every on-site team should know is their local fire regulations. Every city is different and the requirements are different. So even if you work within the same company, you may have different fire regulations at different sites within your portfolio, which is why every on-site team should know the fire regulations in their area. Things like how many smoke detectors are required in the home and where they're required to be located can be different from city to city. So be sure that you're not only in compliance with your own company policy, but that you know the local fire regulations and you're in compliance with that as well. Number 4 is to create an emergency plan. Look, none of us want to be in a situation where we have to handle a fire, but inevitably, it's going to happen. Unfortunately, the larger the community, the larger the population, and the more likely a fire might be started within a home. But we can't neglect our own mechanical equipment and what we have on site. And so that's why it's important to have that emergency plan in place. The emergency plan will hit several different areas. First and foremost, every single employee should know what to do in case of a fire. Everyone will have a different job and a different action that they should take. So you need to outline that in that emergency plan and then communicate that with all of your team members. Next, your emergency plan should include your methods of communication. How will you communicate to your residents that there is a fire and that they need to exit the building? How will you communicate it to your supervisors, regionals? Who's going to be responsible for that? How will you communicate it to the residents who are off-site? How will you communicate it to the media? And how will you communicate it to your vendors who may need to assist? Ensuring that your emergency plan has a thorough guideline for methods of communication is key to preparing properly so that when a fire occurs, you don't have to think, you just take action. The next thing that every emergency plan should have is a containment plan. What will we do if a fire ignites in one building, and how will we contain it to that area and prevent it from spreading elsewhere? It's important that you have that containment plan, and again, everyone knows their part. Your emergency plan should include the proper PPE. What will you have on site to assist your residents and your vendors should a fire break out? Do you have a first aid kit? And do you know where the emergency shutoff valves are? All of these things should be included in your emergency plan, in addition to how to handle the media and who to call in the event of a fire. Of course, you'll have your internal management team, but you'll also have a list of vendors that you should be able to reach out to in the middle of the night. People that can help you with not only containment, but also recovery. You'll want to know the insurance providers you should call and what types of reports to complete. All of this should be included in your emergency plan. And then you want to avoid the biggest mistake of all when it comes to emergency plans. And that is one person puts it together and they put it in a drawer. When it comes to an emergency plan, whether you create it or you inherit it, it's important that every member of the team has a copy of that emergency plan and they know their own role in case of an emergency. Additionally, your residents should have a copy of their emergency plan. What is it that they are supposed to do as residents and how have they prepared their own homes? This is something that should be communicated and revisited on a regular basis so that in times of emergency, in times of crisis, when we are in fight or flight mode, that we revert back to that emergency plan instead of panicking. And my fifth and final tip for you today is probably the one that is least used, and that is completing fire drills. Yes, let's take us back to grade school and let's plan to have drills. What will we do and how will we practice it? They say that in an emergency, we revert back to our lowest level of training, which is why we have to not only create that emergency plan, but implement it within our teams and our resident households. So then we have to put it to practice. Not only practicing with our employees, but yes, practicing with our residents. Can you imagine the difference it would create on your property if your residents actually knew what to do in case of a fire and you actually practiced it with them? Think about the damages that we could prevent and the lives that we could save with just a little preparation and education. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and don't forget, hit the little bell so you can get reminders when I release new content every Monday and every Thursday.